Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Parker, and today we're going to go over a whole load of really useful and important data analyst tools with Excel. So here's things we're going to cover today. We're going to be counting how many times a value appears in a column. Not just a number, but a name maybe. So you've got a list of countries. How many times is the UK referenced in a column? Then we're going to say, right, we've got all these numbers for these countries or people. What are all the values put together? So say we got income for countries, and you got each country listed many times in a list. What's the total income for each country? What's total income or expenditure for each person? We're then going to look at averages, and we're going to say, well, what's the average for a certain group? So what's the average income for a country if we had 50 years of GDP and got all the countries mixed up in a list? We're then going to go on to conditional formatting. So if a column has lots of people's names, then we can say, right, if it's Peter, in the column to the right, we're going to add the number 1. If it's John, maybe add the number 2, etc. So conditional. We're then going to string all those together to make a really complex and useful equation to start giving values. And then finally, we're going to look at a pivot table. Pivot tables are absolutely incredible. I use them all the time, and this helps you mine deep into your data. So if we say, well, we've got women and we've got countries, what's the average of women in this country versus the men in the country? Things that are not easy to get at from just basic data. We're going to do all of this and a few more things along the way, so let's get started. For this, we're going to use 100 body scans, which I collected a few years ago, and it's available online right now. Actually, it's linked in the description below, so you can download this now and work along with me if you so please. Also, it's Creative Commons, so feel free to share. So let's get on to the first exercise, so counting how many times something appears. In our dataset, we've got 100 scans of white and Chinese women. But how many white women and how many Chinese women do I have in my dataset? Let's just go ahead and copy the titles, so white and Chinese, and paste them over here in a different sheet of our workbook. So I've now got the titles. So how often does white appear? We're going to use a function called equals CountIF. So I need to say, right, what's the range that I'm looking at and what's the criteria? The range is where do I find the data, which in this case is just column D of this page. So I can just go forward and select all of this column right down to there. So I've selected that range, comma, criteria. What am I looking for? In this case, go back to my sheet I'm doing calculations on and just click on the title. So close bracket to close it off, press return, and there we are. We've got 50 white and 50 Chinese women. I can then take the bottom right hand of the box, drag it down, and if I double click, you'll see that now we're still looking at ethnicity, but we're now also looking at sheet A. So cell A3, which is our Chinese. Now we know that there's 50-50 of each, partly because I know there is, but also if we go back to the data and I start knocking out, let's say, take off 2 white women from the data set and return to our page, we'll see it's gone down to 48. So it is actually counting. Now that's really useful when you're looking at spreadsheets with lots and lots of data where you can't actually go and count everything together. So what's next? The next column is talking about height. So I want to know what the combined height of all the white and all the Chinese women is. I'm not sure why I'd like to do this. Maybe I'm building some kind of strange James Bond-esque device, but let's go and work out what that is. So how do I do this? So let's do height. Now, once again, I'm going to just copy and paste titles so I know what I'm looking for. And I'm using the formula equals SumIf. Open bracket. So once again, I need a range, I need a criteria, and a sum range. You'll notice that the first 2 parts of this are the same as with CountIF, in that we have range and criteria. So the first bits are very easy. Let's go look at our range. Our range is just going to be ethnicity. Let's just select all of this. It's going down. There we are. Criteria. Back to our sheet, we're going to point at A white and press comma between the arguments. The last part we need is the sum range. Where do we find our data? So first part is saying, right, somewhere in this column is our defining field. Then we'll look for this thing, which is a white. Now let's go and hunt for the data. In this case, it's going to be column E. So the one to the right. It could be any of those columns, but I'm going for the first one, which is height. So just drag down there. So once it finds white person, it jumps to the right, finds that value, and then adds that up. Finish with close bracket and press return. So we have 8,162.9 centimeters of white women in the dataset. Drag this down once again, and that's the total of Chinese women, 8,143 centimeters worth. So we can say, well, what's the average height of a Chinese woman or white woman? Let's work that out. So there's two ways you can do this. I'm just going to once again copy the title so I know what's going on. I could quite easily go equals total height divided by 50 or whatever the number is up there. So I'm just pointing at cells, press return, and hey, that works there. And I can drop this down, and there we are. That works completely fine. But that means we have to go and calculate the total number first, then we've got to calculate the total sum. It's a bit of a pain. So let's use a shortcut. So I'm going to do the same thing, but equals AverageIf open bracket. You will notice that we're looking at the same things as before. We're looking for a range, a criteria, and an average range. Previously, we had for SumIf, it was range criteria, sum range. So you should straight away think, hey, I can do this. So let's go through it again. You'll see exact similarities with SumIf. So back to our anonymous scans. So where do we find our range? Our range is just the ethnicity. Nice and easy. Comma, our criteria, once again, it's that ethnicity title, which is in our copy and paste there. Comma, and the last thing is the average range. What are we averaging? We're averaging height. So let's go back to our scan page. Let's go back to the top, because I always like going from top to bottom, and just select where all the heights is. So we're choosing exactly the same boxes as when we did SumIf. Press close bracket to close it off. And you'll see we got exactly the same number as when we had the long version. Pull this down, and there we are. It's really, really simple. So that is the average height. So we've got average. The next thing to look at is conditional formatting. But before we do that, I want to cover one little thing, which is when you reference cells. So if I double click on this cell here, actually I'll go on to this one here to the side, we'll see that we're doing B6, so total height, divided by B2, which is total number of people. Okay. When I pulled that down, went on to B7, total number of Chinese women, so total height Chinese women, divided by B3, total number of Chinese women. Now let's say I just had a cell called like total number of participants, which is there. So I'm just going to delete, delete my equation there. And I'm going to go, okay, this number here, which is 50, we know that every group's got 50, we've just written 50. So total number divided by, a white. And that's, I'm really putting these in the wrong, aren't I? So equals total height divided by total number. Right, there we are. That's our number, everything's fine, and before. When I pull this down, we get an error. Why do we get an error? Let's look at this. As we pull it down, everything shifts down one. So we're still looking at total height. There we are, Chinese one. But our total number has gone down too. Now, we knew that we wanted to keep everything at D2, but it's now looking at D3. So that's the problem, it's not going to work. So what we need to do is lock down the cell and say, don't move this cell. It's really simple to do. Just put a $sign in front of the thing you want to stay the same. In this case, I want the row 2 to stay the same. So when I press return, doesn't change that equation, everything's the same. But when I copy it down, it now works because this cell's been referenced. So little things to think about. So what's the next thing I want to do? I want to start categorizing my women into their level of fitness. So what we're going to do on this is look at something called the height to weight ratio. Now the height to weight ratio is a really interesting little thing, which is saying that your health is dictated by the fat around your waist. You walk into the doctor and they want to work out how healthy you are. Normally what they do is put you on some scales and they weigh you. Then they take your height and they go, your body mass index, BMI, is this much, so therefore you're unfit or fit. Now, that can kind of work. Actually, the guy who created it said don't use it for this, but yeah, okay, for a whole population it's not so bad. But you've got somebody who does nothing but go to the gym. They are like an absolute ox. They're covered in muscle and they're going to have quite a tight waist, but be very heavy because muscle is very heavy. They're going to have a high BMI, but they're healthy. It's fine. Someone of equal BMI might just eat pizza and chocolate all day, have lots of fat around the waist and be very unhealthy. So BMI does not tell health very well. Height to waist ratio is much, much better, or waist to height ratio is actually better to do it properly. And that is the circumference of the waist divided by the height of the person. So it doesn't matter how much mass you've got, it's the fat. The way we categorize this is ratios. If you've got below 0.34, you're extremely slim and you're very unhealthy. If you are above 0.58, you're obese and you're very unhealthy. Then you've got a range in the middle between 0.42 and 0.48, which is about right. So let's work out how healthy our sample is. So I'm going to go to our 100 scans. And I'm going to put in a new column. I'm going to put it to the right of E, so right click, insert. Actually, I'm going to put it to the right, so it doesn't matter. We have more columns. Happy mistake. So I'm going to call this WTF, waist to W2F. Something on my mind, Freudian slip. WTH, waist to height. So we need to calculate this. So it's very simple. Equals waist circumference, which I know data set is right at the end. So I zoom right to the end, and waist circumference is column DU in this case. So I click on that, go all the way back to the start. So / height, which is column F, and then press return. Excel in for Word is quite nice in that it just fills in for us. So we've now got all our ratios put in. So very easy done, but that doesn't really tell us anything because we've got 100 people. We'd have to keep flipping back to our chart to see if they're healthy or not. Let's find an easy way to do this, which is the if function. So I'm going to add another column in here, and I'm going to call this column healthy. So what do? Now we need to say, if you've got a ratio of whatever this is, then give me a value and put something in. So I'm going to zoom in here to make it nice and clear what I'm doing. So you can all see with the exercise. Right, so we know that the first one is below 0.34 is extremely slim. So let's go here. So equals if, open bracket, that cell is less than or equal to 0.34, comma. Right, so what we've done is put a test in there. So the equal sign isn't essential because it will work without it. But here's the thing. If we are grading student work and 17 above is a first, and we just say if this is greater than 70 and a student scores exactly 70, then the software, Excel, will categorize you in the group below, which is not where you want to be. So when you put the equal sign, it says if you're 70, including 70, then you're higher out. So in this case, we're saying if you are 34 or below 34, then count. So what do? We want to write very slim. So we put quotation marks. Quotation mark says we've got text in here. So very slim. Close it with quotation marks, say that the writing's done. Comma. Actually, I'm just going to put 0 for that. We'll come back to this in a few minutes. close bracket, press return, and we'll see that we've got a whole load of values added in. I don't think anyone in the data set is extremely slim, so everything's been given 0. That's okay. So what about the rest of them? What about the slim and the healthy and the overweight and very overweight and the obese? What are they? How do we get them in? We do this by stringing ifs together. Now, let's have a look at the categories. We know that if you're 0.35 to 0.41, then you are slim. If you're 0.48, you're healthy, so etc. Let's go on and add these in. It's back into our equation. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these. Now, rather than having 0, we're going to put another function, so another if. So that is 0.38 if, sorry, that cell is less than or equal to 0.38, then we are just slim. Let's go back and have a look at this. So, oops, you can't just go back and forth when you're doing this stuff. So let's just go back and look. Yeah, actually it's not 0.38, it's 41. My mistake. Very easy to fix. Let's go back into here and just change that to 41. And that's going to be slim. Okay. The next one is 48 for healthy. So we just go and add another bit in here. If, open brackets, that cell is less than or equal to 0.48, then we are, quotation marks, healthy, quotation marks, comma, 0, close bracket. Nope, we're still not working yet. Next one is overweight, is 0.53. So if, open brackets, that is less than or equal to 0.53, comma, quotation marks, overweight. Oops, I forgot to put the 0 in, so it's saying false. So you put the final argument, which is comma 0. Yep, still kicking it, so 0.63. We're getting quite high here. So the next one is very overweight, 0.57. Okay, so if, open brackets, point to the cell, less than or equal to 0.57, comma, open brackets, very overweight, quotation mark, then, okay, so if we're less than 0.57, then we're very overweight. Now, normally I keep putting 0 here as a place marker, then going back and checking my values and adding more in if I need them, but in this case, we've run out of options. By now, the only thing left you can be is overweight, so, sorry, obese. So I'm just going to put in obese. So you finish your stringed if sections by the only option that's left. So it's like other. So press return. Oops, I need to put another close bracket in. And there we are. So we know that participant 1 is obese. So let's just take this and run this down. So we're just copying this down right to the very bottom, just to there. And there we are. We've categorized the health status of everyone in our data set. And that is great. Now we've got all this stuff. We've got data, but it doesn't really help us that much because I want to know what the health status of the ethnicities are. Now, are white women more obese or less obese, or more healthy or less healthy than Chinese women? For this, we need the last section, which is the pivot table. Let's go and do that. So I'm just going to select our columns. So ethnicity, right over to healthy. So I select the range I like. Actually, I can go a bit further and include weight. You'll see why in a few minutes. And I just drag down, so I'm selecting all of the data. Now, it's okay to select more data than you need. It might be that you're only interested in saying, well, ethnicity and weight or things at the very end. So get everything. So what do I do now? I add a pivot table. Insert, pivot table. Now, the table range, I've already selected. That's fine. Don't need to go and do that. But if otherwise, you would just click on this button here and go and select your data. And I want to put my pivot table in a brand new worksheet. So that's going to be a new tab. Click OK. And it's going to look at this. And straight away, it looks pretty bad. There's nothing there. And we think, oh, we've messed up. But actually, no, this is exactly what it should look like. we've now got to define what our table is using. So I want to know about the health status of all our women. Actually, yeah, we'll carry on for now. So I take ethnicity and drag this to columns. And then I take health status, drag this to rows. So I've now defined where things are, but I don't know how many are in each group or how many unique bits in there. So if I just take the health, where's my health data? Where to put it? I put it, yeah, how many people? You need to have something unique. You know, you've got to have a unique ID for each person to count how many unique people are there. So we need to go back to our data sheets, normal scans, and have a look. Do we have anything in there at the moment? We have a scan code. Scan code in this case is ID number. So let's edit our pivot table to reflect this, to capture this. How do we do that? Go back to our sheet. So our sheet 4, which is where pivot table lives. And we need to, actually, you know what? I'm just going to do a new pivot table because that's going to be slightly easier. Oops. Working with, yeah, let's make a new pivot table. So let's delete that one. Yeah, we're not losing anything. But this time, we're just going to go from scan code all the way through to weight and just drag down, selecting all this stuff, and that's really good. So insert, pivot table, everything's good, okay. Once again, ethnicity is going to be our rows, health is going to be our columns, doesn't actually matter which way around it goes, completely fine. And we take a scan code and drag that into values. Now, scan code, there's a little flag to the right. Right now it's saying sum, which means it's adding together all of the values. I don't really want that. I want to say count. So I choose that, click OK. And now we've got the number of each group. So how many white women are healthy, how many obese, how many overweight, etc. And same for Chinese. So we see that we have no slim white women, 1 slim Chinese woman, 13 obese white women, 3 obese Chinese women. This is great, this is really good, but it's not quite good enough. I want to make a visual for this. So let's make a table. So I'm going to just select our data we've got. So I'm selecting the cells, the ethnicities and the titles. I'm now going to go and insert a chart. So I'm going to insert a bar chart, which is quite nice. Just click on this. And there we go. Make this a bit bigger to make it show nicer. And we can see here that we can see a big difference in healthy category, the first category between the white and the Chinese populations, etc. So there we are. We've gone from having raw data, we've counted the number of people in each group, we've added together all the heights, we've taken average height, we've worked out the height to waist ratio of each person, we've categorized people into levels of health, take them to pivot table to see how many of each group there are, and then finally made a chart. That is the most important lesson I can think of for data analysts. If you've got these skills, then you can do almost all data processing that you're going to come across. So have a go, share this video, and remember, always like, comment, subscribe. If there's a skill which you want to have covered and is not covered so far, just comment below and I'd love to make a video to help you out.